Hello, I'm Frost, and for this episode we're going to be doing something slightly different from my usual EVE Online content. I'm going to call this Alliance Stories, and we're going to be talking about a SIG. So a SIG stands for Special Interest Group, and it's normally a specific group of people within an alliance performing a specific role. In this case, it is the Bastion during the PAPI Imperium War, and the role that their SIG took in affecting the war. Now, my guests are Kronos Thaler, RVA Mitchell and Keisha. So let's start the interview. So hello, thank you very much for coming along. So this is kind of interesting. This is not something I've done before, but we were talking about SIG squads or SIGs and what is actually involved with them. And obviously you guys had a really interesting story. So I've got you all here. So I've got Kronos, RVA and Keisha. Right, hopefully I pronounced all those right.
Yep, you're good.
Yeah.
So hello everyone. So we're going to be talking about SIG. So should we start off with what is a SIG?
Yeah, basically a SIG is basically a separate group that wouldn't be pinged to the alliance, but it'd be a specific group that would take members that wanted to be a part of it, and they would pick the doctrines that they would use in that group, and then they would deploy to an area with an objective or a focus on an objective or target, and then it would be like kind of a special group, special op for a specific target or objective.
Okay, and obviously, just to clear up as well, you guys are all in the Bastion, so that's a pretty big alliance. So obviously the thing with the big alliance is you end up with a kind of a very watered down kind of like doctrines, like everyone has to be able to fly a certain type of ship. So I assume the SIGs allow you to kind of have more specialist roles, maybe higher SP or sort of more player focused kind of tasks that need to be done, right?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a lenience in that way, where if you weren't getting your fill out of what the alliance doctrines were, and you kind of had an idea to something that you wanted to run with the SIG that you were running, then you would kind of be open to that, a little bit of wiggle room, and maybe it's an additional content and a different avenue of content for your player base. So yeah.
Okay, all right. So one of the things we're going to go straight into is obviously you got an example of a special interest group kind of event that happened. Now this happened during the kind of the PAPI Imperium War, and it involved like your group within the Bastion. So do you want to give us an idea of what that was and what the plan was there?
I'll take.
Yeah, go.
So we during that war, we were fighting in Fountain. We ended up losing our home system in Fountain. Thereafter that, we were trying to figure out what do we want to do now? What can we do? We could just jump in and be extra numbers in the Imperium fleets, or we can go try to do something else. So that might be a little bit more than just being in 200 man fleets, 300 man. Those big tie-dye fights, they're fun and they're great, but we kind of wanted to try to punch up a little bit as an alliance and just as a group, as a smaller group.
Okay, so what was the plan then?
So we were, I think Keisha and I were sitting and talking, trying to figure out what would be the best target, and we were looking at different regions, so like where could we go, and so then we decided to basically go to Stain, base out of Stain, and then just do kind of hit and run tactics and try to punch up to Test and Esoteria.
Okay, I'll say one of the things that we need to kind of bring everyone up to speed at this point was that Test kind of left Esoteria, which was kind of their homeland, very undefended, because they were basically putting all their forces into Delve by this point, or just moving into Delve, right, along with the rest of PAPI. So that kind of gave you an opportunity to not have to fight the whole of Test at once, because obviously their focus was elsewhere. So was that kind of the what you mean by being able to punch up?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so what's involved then? At that point, you've got to deploy, right? I assume you have to get everything out there and make it happen. So how do you go about that?
we first started pretty small. We started as just a small Alliance SIG. I moved some jump freighters full of. We went with a bomber doctrine at first. What else did we pick? With bombers, Asteros.
Bombers, Asteros. Just kind of covert bait stuff. Just kind of keep things simple because we weren't sure what kind of response we'd get when we got over there. So I think we started with about 30 bill. And a couple of people, I think Soft Insanity, one of our Sky Team members, helped us kind of get set up there with RVA, and we set up shop in a stain station. RV had a time he can tell you about this meeting the Stainrus.
Okay, yeah. So Stain Roos, those guys, that is their territory. So obviously you moved into Stain because Stain gives you some projection. Obviously there's the gate into Esoteria from U-W into VYJ, I think, and then you've also got Blops capabilities into the west of Esoteria. But how did Stain Roos take it that you guys just suddenly showing up in Stain, because they're quite protective about their NPC space?
The first jump freighter full of bombers and stuff for us to our doctrine ships to use got spotted by Stainrus, and I think on my second to last jump through Stain, they ended up bubbling the station, shooting the diamond rats to trap them into the bubbles on the station, so I would not be able to leave. And so
yeah, that's proper old school, right? But bubbling a station.
Very friendly welcome. Yeah.
I didn't make the smart decision. I docked my jump freighter in a kick out station, so there wasn't really much I could do. I wouldn't be able to redock if I undocked my jump freighter because they were going to bump me off.
Yeah.
But so that happened that was the first day, and then we started playing the diplomacy side of it. I think Keisha, you probably can touch a little bit on that.
Yeah, I didn't really think about it because it had been a while since I had been in Stain in that, or operating in that area. I think the last time we had gone there was the Halloween War, which was 2013. I'd like to say dates are a little bit fuzzy for me. Where we were working with the Russians back then, but so we get to Stain, we get to their station, and RV has his bubbling issues and stuff, and almost dying, and we get told that we can't be here. And I was just like, what are you talking about? This is like NPC station, like what do you mean we can't be here? And it's just like, it's that old myth of the Russians, that they're always lurking around. There's always supers or titans, logged off somewhere, and they always have eyes in their systems, and they protect their stain drops that's specific to that area. But basically, yeah, they told us that we couldn't operate there, and I was just like, well, what's this diplomacy? I've never heard of that. And then I had to poke people, and people informed me that, yeah, you can't do that. And so we actually had to work out a deal to a station that we could operate in without being harassed by the locals, and in a citadel that we got permission to use to bridge off of. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So can I ask what the deal was?
Basically, it was just permission.
Okay.
You kind of had to ask. You couldn't just operate. And so yeah.
I think what's key to mention is that Stainrus are, to us who don't live there, are kind of one large group of Russians, but inside there's actually lots of different smaller groups. So it was as soon as you arrived as an outsider, though, they all unified, and you were the outsider, and that's what we definitely faced. Right.
Yeah, I was part of Stainwagon at one point, so I'm very familiar with how they operate. But for the benefit of people watching, I mean, obviously you've got Against All Authorities, who are the best known one probably, which is the largest of the groups. But then you've got Fast Kick, you've got Good Sax. I'm trying to think of the others off the top of my head, but those are kind of some of the main players that you see. And then obviously there's a lot of smaller groups, but they all share a kind of a common language, which is mostly Russian-speaking groups. In the Russian time zone, and when they're not in catch, whenever they get kicked out of catch, which is kind of where they like to go if they can, then they always retreat back to Stain, and they very much consider that their homeland, as you said. So okay, so obviously you've got yourself implanted now. So you're in Stain, you're managing to get stuff in. So how are you going about harassing Test? What is it that you're managing to do that's going to create problems for them?
So we kind of started off with it, with poking their jump bridges and citadels within the immediate range, but after X amount of time, it became really time consuming and inconvenient because of where we were in Stain. So we moved forward to deploy an Astra House in HT4K, which ended up being our capital system in the future, so that we could operate closely and there was less travel time between target and where our home was.
Yeah, and you've got more projection as well, because you can pretty much reach the whole of most of Esoteria from there with blocks, right?
Do we want to mention the structure spam that allowed us to beachhead?
Yeah. Okay. So I think at one point we had about we had a lot of people in the SIG, but it was in varying time zones. And for those that run fleets and whatnot, I'm sure most people know of the PAP system, PAP links. People want PAPs. People want credit for their time in fleet. Otherwise, there's typically not a reason for them to kind of join fleets unless you're PvP based and you like the content. So I had to come up with a way to keep the membership active without an FC being involved. So within the PAP system, you could make you could add people to, and this might be boring, but you can add people afterwards. So I'd tally up basically who was active that day without an FC around, and then people could get their PAP links. And so that way we could actually have 24/7 all time zones, people doing things and getting the credit for it without an FC being available. And so in the beginning we had that coupled with an ISK incentive for how many times they've pinged a structure.
Okay.
Pinging a structure, and I'll just quickly. And so, pinging a structure, for those that don't know, if you get it down to 95%, if they have a bot linked to that structure via the ESI and whatnot, then they'll get a notification. So we had people pinging 50 structures sometimes a day, just spamming tests with pings and just trying to wear them out with responses. Yeah.
I understand that, because I was thinking, okay, well, you've got guys going out without FCs, and normally that can be a disaster. But what you're talking about here is it could be literally 2 or 3 individuals in bombers just going to some random Astra house, shooting it till it's in below 95% shields, just so that it sets off that ping to alert test that stuff is being hit in the region. So basically, you're just setting off constant alarm bells for them, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
and
pretty much.
It's also setting off alarm bells for every member who's logged in fleets in Delve, Period Basis Fountain, trying to take over the Imperium's homeland, because it pops up in game when your structure is hit.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So at that point, what I see is that you've started to harass. You've become clearly a pain. You've got Stain Roos on board. You're able to get into Esoteria, so you managed to kind of set up a beachhead in HT4K. And then you started pinging all these Astra houses and structures. So at that point, eventually you can only do that for so long before it becomes kind of crying wolf, right? That you actually have to do some damage now, not just set off alarms. So how did you kind of take it up to the next level? So
Keisha mentioned about the ISK incentive. So I can't remember what the exact values were, but we offered a couple mil, a few mil for just the notification, but then we also were offering more ISK if they ended up reffing the structure. And so at some point we started, test stopped responding to some of those pings, and then we started reffing them. Some of those structures we were reffing, we would ref multiple times and would eventually go low power, and some of them even went abandoned. And then, so now that we were killing structures, or we started to kill structures, it really bumped up the amount of participation we got, because people love kill mills.
Yeah, also the other benefit is obviously if you're killing abandoned structures, that really hits the players themselves. You know, it's like when an Astra House is killed, it's normally the corporation or the alliance that put it down that's upset about it dying. When it's abandoned, then obviously everything that belongs to the player that was in that structure drops out, and then that starts really affecting morale. So obviously the more structures that you're hitting, and if the test can't get back to actually deal with those structures, then that really helps you from the point of view of a propaganda war as well, right?
Exactly.
That's very true.
Okay, so you started hitting structures and stuff. So please take me down to the next step then, because obviously there's a lot more to this. Now you're deployed. People know you're there. You know, you are reinforcing structures. You know, obviously things are going to escalate now, and resources are going to have to be pulled back to deal with you guys. So what happens at that point?
I mean, we started doing more. We wanted to find a cheap way to deal with the iHubs and TCUs. Kind of, you know, you get to a point where, you know, pinging does in reffing jumpers is, you know, it has its effect, but, you know, we figured let's start working with stain rusts, and start taking SOV. Once we started hitting iHubs and TCUs, Test was taken a little more seriously, and they started bringing like 150-man, you know, Munin fleets, 100-man T5 fleets, and so we'd kind of try and coordinate our reffing of the TCUs and iHubs with the major objectives that we're having in Delph. And so within that time, we were coordinating, hitting, and creating timers during the Keepstar drops.
Right.
And I think at that time we had, I can't remember if our first one died. We decided that, you know, we're going to up the game a bit, and we needed some more donations, a bit more ISK support. We called for it, we got it, and we launched the Fortizar.
Okay.
Then once we launched, yeah.
Okay, so you got your Fortizar in place, and then, like you said, you've gone into SOV warfare. So there's, as I understand, there's normally two roles there. One is obviously to create a distraction. So you're forcing Test to be in two places at once, and potentially PAPI support to come in as well to help with that. On top of that, then obviously by hitting iHubs, if you hit iHubs that have jump gates in them, then you take out the jump gates, which removes the ability for the fleets to be able to get back into Esoteria very quickly. The other thing as well, I assume, is you're hitting iHubs in heavy ratting systems, because if I remember correctly, Test Alliance with the Care Bears was still ratting in Esoteria and making their Iskies there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you take down the iHub, then you remove all the anomalies, and suddenly the ratting space looks pretty miserable. So that at that point you are seriously pissing people off, right? So you said, you know, you're getting sort of 150 Munin fleets coming now. Did you have the numbers to be able to handle that? And did you need support from anybody, and how involved was the rest of the Imperium now in what you were doing as a SIG?
So that was kind of like the coolest thing about it. We had built such a great relationship with Stainrus. They love the PvP. They're all about PvP.
Mm-hmm.
They love the PvP. So if we could give them targets, they'll be happy. We can do the objectives. We can do the intosicine. You know, they helped in that, but we tried to do as much of the intosicine and kind of node work so that they could do the killing. So what would happen is we'd create these timers. They'd bring 150 people in this Munin fleet, and then we'd get the Stainrus to undock their signature NATO fleet and just kill them off.
Yeah.
You know,
so we're talking about the tornadoes here, right? The snipey tornadoes.
Yeah. So they'll end up
Yeah.
sending 150 Munins or Munins over, and that and typically there would be like maybe 8 to 15 of us dual boxing, triple boxing. We had some quad boxers, just trying to boost our fleets, but the 18 to 15 of us, if we can pull 150 people off the front line of test, then we're really punching up. And then that also helped with the narrative that the Mittani and Brisk could spin on the meta show, saying, "Where's Test? oh, they're in Esoteria, but they're supposed to be leading the charge in the war. And so we got that front of it as well. So it was great for a small group punching up and pulling 150 people back in Esoteria when they're supposed to be, defending or trying to get a Keepstar down or a major objective in Delph. That's a huge.
Okay, so sorry, I'm going to jump in really quickly as well, because I remember something that you guys mentioned was you said that Stain Roos want the PvP, so you're kind of doing the objective stuff. Some dreads, right? So didn't you help Stain Roos with actually supplying them with some ships and stuff?
Yes, we did. We managed. The Bastion managed to build. I think it was 30 dreads for them. Got them all moved over, helped them that avenue. So.
Okay, yeah. So basically, there was a benefit then for Stain Roos in one sense, because they got access to your shipyard, so to speak. So they could enjoy their PvP more. So at this stage as well, I know that the initiative somehow got involved with this as well, right? Is that correct?
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of the timelines. Yeah, so with where Test had their SOB timers, they were set in the EU time zone at that point, and that's when a discussion was had with I think it might have been Bonga at the time, and with our Fortisar being they had the day that they decided to move over, I think they had a full fleet of 255 mutants come in and set jump clones into our capital that was HG4K.
Okay, so the initiative deployed to HG4K, or deployed some clones there and some ships.
Yeah. It'd be a jump clone based deployments so that they could assist in major timers. But I think after 2 or 3 days of them deploying, Test had reset their iHub and SOB timers to, I think it was like 2300, which kind of ended up being out of their time zone. And since in its time was very Euro time zone heavy, it didn't. Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, but the initiative sort of showing up didn't create too many issues. Then it was just more that you tried to bring them in as reinforcements, but then basically time tanking was used to kind of avert that problem from the point of view of Test.
And it then did rotate into Catch, I believe, and did do an awful lot of damage out there afterwards, which was much more time zone friendly for them, which again took focus off other places.
Okay, so I mean, is now we kind of got an idea of what a SIG does, how it's set up, what you can do to assist in a war, with small numbers, but you're basically pulling away big numbers from the main fight. I mean, what would you say are things that you would want people to be aware of when kind of doing this kind of activity? What have you learned from this, and what went wrong as well? I mean, it couldn't have all been smooth sailing, right?
I think so riding those highs, I think are really important on a deployment like this. Taking those, I mean, we had some internal propaganda we were passing around. That was kind of boosting morale, and like I said, riding those morale highs. So we had a few days where we were very ISK positive. I think we had one day. He stole. I think it was six Tataras.
Yeah.
Right anchoring.
Yeah. That was the thing that we kept on pushing, was that aside from building out of Esoteria, we couldn't figure out why they just didn't come and kill our Astra House when we first landed. Had they done that, it would have immobilized us. To some degree, but yeah, they were actually funding the war effort against themselves, because we had limited funding with having to pay for the SRP and whatnot with the Keepstars and stuff that were dropping. But yeah, Carlos, if you want to go into like what we got
there were some days when we were down to a couple of million ISK, and we'd have to do quite risky jump freighter runs back towards Highset to get things sold that had been looted, or to try and find the shortfall. and in order to pay us a fee and to keep things going. But that was half the challenge on my end, was just keeping the money flowing, and Mitchell and I keeping the jump freighter supply runs going as well was quite a bit of fun.
Wars are expensive. That's a fact, isn't it?
100%. Yes.
Yeah. Even when you're winning, they're still expensive. Yeah. Because you got to keep that steamroller working. So basically, obviously, you were getting loot from like abandoned structures. I assume you said there were Tataras anchoring. So what, you were stealing cores, that kind of thing?
This was right when I think the core changes were happening. The people were on anchoring structures. Test was moving into Delve. So we weren't really getting too many cores. Say at the beginning, maybe towards the end, we were getting some more.
Okay.
But I think the biggest, I'd say, moneymaker would have to be after we killed the iHub in DTAC-F. So in DTAC-F, that iHub was or that system was a supercapital production system.
Roger. Yeah.
So we killed that iHub, and we actually paused. I think it was 2 Titans that were being built.
It was a Titan jumper, yeah.
Okay.
And so we
yeah.
That became a prime focus of us. So we ref that thing. How many times? Like 10, 15 times?
12 or
Initial,
13,
yeah.
I remember. Yeah.
And we had, so in order to reinforce that Satio, we had to bring in supers, and we had to revamp into a Leshak doctrine, which we still chuckle over today that we actually built a Leshak doctrine and ran it in Esoteria.
Okay, and that worked, did it? I mean, so it's like Leshaks can go one of 2 ways, right? It's like, if you're not disturbed, they're awesome, but things can also go wrong with Leshaks. They don't stand up well against Munids, for example, which can alpha you off the grid if you've got more than like 100, 150 of them. Whilst the Leshak kind of needs its time, needs a bit of patience, doesn't it? It likes to build up to things. So I mean, were you okay with those? I mean, did you manage to find the right time to use them?
I mean, I'll just quickly. Originally, we went with polar bombers for the high DPS and the ability to triple box polar bombers. You can incap. It was kind of like based off what can you incap with 3 polar bombers quickly within that 95% range and reinforcing. If you get 6 or 7 polar bombers, you cap out the damage cap, and you're maximizing your reinforcement ability. I'll give kudos to Test for their fire system. Their fire system was their kind of like the response, kind of like PvP core within the regions. They kind of had it very well organized. But after ISK was kind of a thing, we went from polar bombers to a destroyer platform with coursers, so that we could just sit there with lasers, and then to Leshaks and
RV. The Leshak doctrines were great because I've mentioned before, we were getting a lot of a handful of abandoned structures. So we started building Leshaks off of the abandoned loot that we were getting.
Okay.
To the point where we had one fight. I might be able to send you a video. Where were we fighting TFIs?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was, and what led to this was we had actually pushed them back before previous in the same system until they called in help. They brought in 300 people, whatever, but we actually pushed Test themselves when it was kind of a fair fight. But it was DTAC-F in the Satio fight. Yeah, we were kind of like, fuck it.
We are like, oh, we can take. We're probably gonna die if we take this fight, but we had enough spare resources. We're like, you know what? Let's see what the Leshak doctrine can do, and we just decided to go and brawl TFIs with Leshaks and died in a ball of glory. Ball of glory.
That was going to be the exact words I was going to pick there. So yeah, Tempest Fleet issues versus Leshaks. Well, good for trying as well, because you know what? If it had worked, you would have discovered something, and it would have potentially changed the way the doctrines work. So okay, I think we're probably going to wrap it up there, unless you guys can think of some other elements that you really want to include in there that we haven't covered.
Yeah, I mean, aside from the Satio dying and it being the second largest engineering citadel cost of the game.
That's right. It had Take 2 rigs, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
it's
that allowed us to make the dreads for Stainrust. That allowed us to basically fund the rest of the war that we did out there, because it was obviously at least two Titans which were aborted. The funds from that allowed us to make our own capitals out there and put in an awful lot more work.
rebuilt the rebuilt the Lashaks that we lost same day. Kind of helped us in that. I guess the only other notable thing was maybe the fight of HT4K. I'll quickly pinch on. We had in it another GSF fleet. We had I think like 500, but it was like 500 vs 800 or something like that in our capital system. When they finally got upset that we were killing their capitals on our Fortizar after their 5th attempt, they finally got our capital Fortizar and HG4K to final timer by bringing in Titans. The only reason why that we lost that capital is because Stainrust at the time owned a public Sino generator next door, and they didn't change the the access list, and so they managed. We had everything bubbled up and whatnot. They weren't getting in. I think we had like 5 minutes left on the timer, and then we got intel that they're going to use the public generator. I'm just like, turn it off. It's like, don't worry, we got it. Like, no, turn it off. And then
okay, right. So it's a public Sino beacon, is what you're saying, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Typically used for bait beacon.
Yeah, typically used for bait beacon, and it was within your kind of the systems that you had blocked off with bubbles, so they're able to jump past the bubbles.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's unfortunate, but then that's the issue. When you're working across multiple groups, whether that's with PAPI had that issue as well. Sometimes communication within the groups wasn't always working, and it happens in all of these situations, and it can be the silliest thing that can be a downfall sometimes.
I get.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I only have one real thing that in terms of that stands out to me that we haven't mentioned was MTAC 2. The big M2 fight was the big fight of the time of all the capitals that got trapped in there. Mm-hmm. Now a small group of the SIG were the night before. Vili spent 5 hours chasing us around Esoteria and not getting a particularly early night.
Okay.
And
that was. I don't think you probably have more of a story on that.
I'll try to make it brief. Basically we had been if you look at Dotland, you'll see what connections you can make via jump bridges to connect Esoteria to Impasse when fleets need to run out of Delve through Esoteria into Impasse to the catch timers and whatnot that Init and Stainrust and RC were creating. So that was DTX8. DTX8, I think we had attempted to ref that thing and ref the JB like a million times, but we had finally gotten reinforcement timers in DTX8, and we were winning it, and I think we're about like an hour into going back and forth, and finally Vili called for I think jump cloning back, and everybody came in, and he ran an I think it was I can't remember what they were called, but the interceptor fleet, and he just had to run back and forth, gate after gate after node, killing our Intosicine frigates for 4 or 5 hours. And the next day, when the M2 incident happened, we had gotten word that Vili was complaining about how tired he was, and kind of led to the fatigue of the bad decision.
It's the whole butterfly effect, right? Exactly. Yeah. Excellent. Well, I think that's a good way to finish it off. Also, you guys almost pretty much ended up living in Esoteria for a while, like the whole of Bastion, right? You kind of ended up.
It was very
living in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but now you're home again, right?
Oh yeah, back in
Fountain.
Good old Fountain. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we were the longest forward deployed Imperium group. It eventually turned out of an Alliance SIG, or out of just a SIG, into an Alliance deployment at some point.
I think it went from a SIG to an Alliance deployment to, it's quite nice here. We will just stick around for a while. Yeah, so very interesting. But anyway, so thank you very much, guys. That was really interesting. Kind of gave a good insight as well as to kind of, some of the stuff that happened during the PAPI War that was kind of not necessarily kind of frontline news, but it also, I think, gave a really good example of how special interest groups and how small groups of players can really affect, big wars and the parts that everybody plays. So thank you very much. So Kronos, RVA, and Keisha, that was absolutely brilliant.
Keep having
Thanks
us.
for having us.
There we go. I hope you found that interesting. For me, I thought it was a very, very good insight into how an alliance doesn't necessarily have to have everything done on an alliance level, but sometimes just a small number of individuals within a group can make a difference. So there we go. If you'd like more of these, then do please let me know in the comments. Please let me know your thoughts about this as well, about everything that we discussed. And as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell icon for notifications, and see you soon. Thanks. Bye.